All right. Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm all set up here. Um, so let's talk about Agenda 21.
Great.
And I'm just interested in your opinion on Agenda 21 and then how it connects to local government and local municipalities, like how it's affecting on that level.
hmm
Um,
Well,
so,
great. Well, as you know, United Nations Agenda 21 is the agenda for the 21st century that, it was signed on to by George H.W. Bush in 92, and Clinton created the President's Council on Sustainable Development in 1993, and the purpose of it was to implement Agenda 21 in the United States. And so it's kind of a top-down thing, but it comes up locally. It's it's administered locally, and so the President's Council on Sustainable Development, the first thing that they did, they were a group of 12 cabinet-level ministers, and it included captains of industry, including Ken Lay from Enron. This was in '93, and then other non-governmental groups as well, like the Sierra Club and I think the Natural Resources Defense Council. Other groups were all part of the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And so one of the things that, the first thing they did really was they gave a $1 million grant to the American Planning Association because they wanted to implement Agenda 21 locally throughout the United States. So what they did was they came up with, after, it took them about 6 years or so, they came up with Growing Smart, which is a legislative guidebook with model legislation. And so that's where the term smart growth comes from. And the other thing, one of the other major things that the President's Council on Sustainable Development did was they created a book called Sustainable America, A New Consensus. And the idea was that a lot of these programs were not going to be popular with the people of the United States. And so there was a need for a new way of decision making, and they called this a new consensus. And I'm a feminist. I came out of the feminist tradition, long, 1970s, 80s of, you get a bunch of women in a room together and you have some premise and then you sit there for 10 hours until you work out something that works for all, everyone who's in that group. That's real consensus. And if you look at your dictionary, it's agreement between all members of a group on, on a particular issue. But the new consensus is neutralization of opposition. So it's actually a restriction on free speech and dissent. And that is codified as part of the President's Council on Sustainable Development. So the way that it's implemented locally is, there are just myriad ways. One is in regionalism, which we're seeing more and more, specifically here in the Bay Area. You can see it in the onebayarea.org program. If you go to that website, and you might have already been aware of that, they're using regional transportation groups like MTC and ABAG to direct funding. Now there are a lot of transportation dollars, and so regional transportation is a good thing. I'm not against that, but I think that when you tie that to land use and housing, and you make it so that communities cannot get transportation dollars unless they agree to only develop within certain redevelopment areas that are along transportation corridors, then you're directing, you're using my property tax dollars, my dollars, those redevelopment is funded by property tax dollars locally. So, it's one thing to build for-profit condos, in a transportation corridor, but it's another thing to use redevelopment and the power of eminent domain and our property tax dollars to build for-profit condos. And those, you have the ground floor retail with the 2 or 3 stories of residential above, and the idea is that you can get more bang for your buck on greenhouse gas reduction if you cut transportation, if you stop people from using their private vehicles, right? But the idea, of course, is that there's not enough money to take public transportation out to the rural and suburban areas. So you want to bring all those people into the inner cities so that you can get them to use the transportation that's there. But, people don't want to give up most people don't want to live in an apartment. They want their privacy. They want, I happen to be a feminist, pro-choice, pro-gay marriage, anti-war liberal, right? And for some reason, property rights issues seem to be couched in as a right-wing thing. They're not. This is not a right-wing. First of all, it's not a right-left issue anyway. But this is not something, that's only being supported by people who are more on the other end of the spectrum from me. I think that we need to resist anything that is going to restrict our civil liberties. And this is this program does restrict our civil liberties. And the idea of reducing waste and conserving energy is definitely good, and I support that. It's just I do not support using a greenhouse gas mask to develop vertical sprawl. And it's we're seeing corporate greenwashing because there's a ton of money. There's a big money in green. In green energy loans, supposedly there's $5 trillion out there in green, in private money waiting to do green energy loans. Chinese solar panels, the bureaucracy of the not smart train. And, artificial consensus is what they need. They're using community buy-in, so-called community buy-in, but they're restricting it by having these, like for instance, that regional meeting that I was telling you about, the One Bay Area. It's called Plan Bay Area, and they're having these meetings all over the 9 counties of the Bay Area, and they're arranging these meetings so that, you really don't have a voice. They want to get a lot of people in the room so that they can say that they have community buy-in. But the truth is, it's completely skewed when you look at what your choices are. When you look at the choices they give you up on the screen, and you're supposed to vote with your clicker, and it's completely biased. And this is something that I do not like. Being I don't like being tricked. I don't like being manipulated. And if these ideas are really good ideas, then the people are going to support them. We don't need gross manipulation and restriction of our civil liberties in order to do things that are more energy efficient and more and more conscious.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did you first make that connection between the redevelopment and those things that you're talking about and Agenda 21? When did that light go on for you?
Well, I know I'm not sure if you're aware that I am a commercial appraiser, commercial real estate appraiser, and my specialty is eminent domain valuation, and I'm a litigation support person. So I'm an expert witness. And I appraise in all 9 counties of the Bay Area. And
do you do that with an organization, or is that a private business, or how does that work?
I work for the Department of Transportation, but I prefer it if you don't mention my employer, because I'm not, I'm not representing my employer when I talk about these things.
Okay.
You can say I work for a large government agency if you want to, but when I work in all 9 counties, and about 10 years ago, I started recognizing that there was a planning revolution going on. And that was around the time that Growing Smart, a legislative guidebook, which is actually a blueprint, that was produced by the American Planning Association. That got disseminated to every community in the United States in around 2002. And it's in all the universities, in the planning departments, transportation. If you're becoming a transportation engineer or planner, you're going to be studying that. So, but I didn't know that, and but I did see that every community was getting the same type of development. Every community, was, and I didn't really have an understanding of, particularly of redevelopment. But when I bought a couple of properties that are in Santa Rosa, and some of the neighbors said, hey, would you like to run for this project area committee election that is happening for property owners and residents and business owners in that area? It's 1,100 acres. So I said, sure, because I just read Dude, Where's My Country by Michael Moore. And I said, he really urges you to get involved locally. And I had always been involved politically on national issues. I'd been, pro gay rights and pro-choice and anti-war. So I hadn't really done anything locally. So I got, I did get elected to that committee. And so I hadn't really put together this idea of the planning revolution and redevelopment until I started examining the documents that justified the blight, for the redevelopment project. And the documents were fraudulent. The support that the city of Santa Rosa had gotten from their consultant was skewed, seriously. And I found that out, just by looking at my own, the thing you do is you got property, you look at your own property on their maps and stuff, and you read what they have to say about it, and it was like, whoa, this is wrong. And if our stuff's wrong, then I wonder who else's stuff is wrong. And the city did not, the city fought me every step of the way. And the funny thing was, I really expected to be helping the city, because here I am, I'm a litigation expert, I'm an eminent domain expert, and I thought, the city's going to be real glad to have me on that board because, I'm going to help explain to the other board members how all this stuff works. And, they put a lot of effort into trying to manage me. They brought a facilitator in, they accused me of a Brown Act violation that I didn't do. And finally, they dropped my area out of, we petitioned to have our area removed from the project.
Was that the Gateways Development Project?
Yes, that's the Gateways Redevelopment Project. Yes, it's 1,100 acres, goes from Kiwanis Springs Road all the way up to, way up there. It's like 5 miles long. It's, it's a huge area to say is blighted. Tremendous. And blight is a technical term, It means that the area is so physically and economically depressed, and it's having such a drain on the entire community. And there's no way that anyone would be willing to make an investment in that area unless they were given government subsidies, and they use your property tax dollars to do that. So anyway, so I was, reading up on this, and I thought, and enemies were like crawling out of the woodwork, attacking me. And I thought, this is bizarre. All the people that I would expect to be making common cause with, all the other, Democrats, people who are also environmentalists, people who are, liberal like me, they're attacking me. And it was bizarre. And I thought, well, what the heck is behind this? Who are all these people? Then I found out that, for instance, the California Lung Association advocates for smart growth. They have an advocacy arm. There are many groups that support redevelopment. And, when I started looking at where the funding for a lot of, so I looked behind it and I found United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. I wasn't, looking for it. But I knew, for some reason, redevelopment seemed to be at the heart of so much of what was happening, and it's because it's a funding and implementation arm for United Nations Agenda 21 on a local level.